Welcome to the Own Your Time podcast. This is the host, Kyle Marcotte, and today we are interviewing Jaren Barnes. Jaren Barnes is the Senior Creative Director at ReTipster.com. For 2 years of his career, Jaren was responsible for selling 25 plus properties per month. He is also the co-host of the ReTipster podcast. Welcome to the show, Jaren.
It's a pleasure to be here, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, man. It's so great to have you on, and I haven't seen you in a bit, but it's been great. And let me just ask you a question about what is your story? How'd you get started in real estate? How'd you get to the point that you are today?
Yeah, man. I mean, really what happened is when I first became an adult, I was really idealistic and I was pursuing a bunch of nonprofit stuff and like kind of quote unquote following my heart. And then long story short, I met a girl that I knew I was supposed to get married to. And I found out that there's this thing called bills. And so I had to like actually make sure that I could pay those bills in order to sustain a life and family and all of that. But I didn't have, I actually dropped out of my freshman year of college because just college wasn't for me. And I was like, it was super expensive. I was paying out of pocket, didn't have any scholarships. And I was like, you know what, screw this. I'm just going to go and pursue my passions, man. And then as most people realize when they get older that pursuing your passions doesn't really work out if you don't have money. So I had to very quickly, without a college degree, figure out a source of income. And when I first got married, I was really young. I was 2 days into being 20 when I got married, and it was July 7th actually. So next week will be, at the time of this recording, will be our anniversary. And my birthday is July 5th. So 2 days into being 20. And I was kind of dragging my wife through the mud for a while there, career-wise. I was like, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go do that. And I actually ended up getting my insurance license and started pursuing insurance. But a month into it, I had some friends that had bought into a guru course, and I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time, and they convinced me to quit my day job, which was salaried plus commission with insurance. It was really good. And they're like, if we do one deal, you can make $100,000. I was like, man, if I just sell one, I just need to sell one a year. I'm fine. So obviously it's not exactly how it all works out. Maybe in commercial real estate, but for most people in flipping houses, it doesn't work out that way. So I literally quit my job and started door knocking pre-foreclosures that day. Like I walked out of my office, went from San Jose to Milpitas, walked into their office and started door knocking. And unfortunately, they had kind of gotten in sync with a really unethical fix and flip company. So it was quite the adventure. I got a lot of properties, at least relative. Everything's relative, right? But for me, I got 10 properties in 6 months of door knocking. And they didn't end up paying me much. If anything, there was like a bunch of stuff that they were doing that was, if I knew what they were doing now, I wouldn't have worked with them. I'll just put it this way. Some of the things that was going on could have had everybody involved end up in jail. So I'm really glad and thankful that I don't work with them, but I'm thankful that I also learned a lot because I learned about grit. I learned about real estate. I actually started a blog called Real Estate Catalyst. And I was documenting my journey in real estate, wrote a review on biggerpockets.com. And this is back in 2014. So they were not as big as they are now. Now they're huge, but they were still really big. They were the biggest players in the space, but it was just Josh and Brandon at the time, and then a couple of VAs. I wrote a review about them, and they got on their radar, and they're like, hey man, thank you so much. And then I ended up connecting them with the leader of the Bigger Pockets meetups in the San Francisco Bay Area. They came out to do a presentation for Google and then kind of did a meet and greet with the Bigger Pockets meetup connection and network in the Bay Area. Got on their radar, and they were looking to hire and grow and expand their team. But I didn't want to move to Denver. Josh didn't want another remote employee. We kind of merged our skills together, collaborated, knowing that it was going to be temporary until they found a replacement for me. And then I helped train my replacement, and she's actually still there today. I think she's the senior of content, or she's something. She was the blog editor for a long time, but I don't know what she's doing now. Allison is who replaced me. From there, I was kind of at a cross section between content and real estate. And I ultimately decided to get my real estate license. I moved to Indianapolis, and I was going to pursue real estate, but then got hired by a wholesaler named Brett Snodgrass, who owns a company called Simple Wholesaling, to do content marketing stuff for him and help brand his company. Halfway through my time there, I ended up switching to the deal side, and I was the lead of dispositions. I was personally responsible for selling 25 to 30 properties a month. And then from there, I started my own land business and ended up working at ReTipster.
Wow, man. What a journey.
My whole life.
What a
Yeah.
journey. Especially, I mean, getting married at 20 is insane. I can't even imagine that. That's, I mean, good for you and congratulations on the upcoming anniversary as well.
Thank you. You know, when you know it's the right person, there's pros and cons to every choice you make in life, but I like that I grew up with my wife and that we went through a lot of struggles together. Now we're like best friends. We know each other thick and thin, you know?
Yeah, that's amazing. So getting through all those struggles, let's use that as a little segue here.
Yeah.
What drives you to keep going through? Because it seems like you've had to overcome so very much and you've gone through so many transitions in your career. So what drives you through all of that?
For good or for bad, my personality is achievement oriented. I just want to make a dent on the universe. Impact is my main driver. And in order for me to make an impact, you have to have a track record that makes people pay attention to you, right? So what do people pay attention to? They pay attention to lots of money. They pay attention to results in whatever vicinity that you get results in, whether it's working out and getting super ripped, or if it's getting a bunch of career accolades for if you're pursuing academia or what have you. So I am very, very oriented about wanting to become very, very successful so that people pay attention so that I can make an impact on their life in a positive way.
Wow, that's awesome. What about making a positive impact on a one-to-one basis, just being so amazing? Like honestly, just meeting you, man, the way you make me feel as a person, I think is more impactful than any sort of credentials, any sort of title, any sort of amount of money. So I think that, maybe that's just, what are your thoughts on that kind of thing? Like your impact, I think you already have an impact is something that I would kind of say to you is I think you're making an impact on a smaller scale that eventually ripples into a bigger thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But if I was a bum on the street corner and I was straight up homeless and we met and I was like telling you stuff, you probably, no matter what I told you, you probably wouldn't value it, right? Because there's nothing about my life that you desire or that you find inspiring. But the fact that I'm on a journey and that I've gotten, like I work at ReTipster and there's a brand behind my name, et cetera, there's those progressions create the influence that I have. And I agree with you to some degree. Somebody listens to the ReTipster podcast every other week when it comes out. I think right now we're actually doing every week. For a while there was every other. But yeah, I mean, somebody's listening. And there's videos that I've made for ReTipster and stuff that have done pretty well and things like that. But my friend invited me to like a Tony Robbins private Facebook group or something earlier today. It's like some challenge they're doing. They're going to shut down their private Facebook group after 7 days. And I just look at this guy and, his arms are stretched out. He's like, rah! And everything in me wants to be like a Tony Robbins kind of figure, and it's not always a good thing. It's just honest. That's just, there's a large aspect of being unsatisfied and not being content. Like I'm probably the most uncontent person you will ever meet because I really want to be that guy that makes a dent in the universe. And so it's a good driver because it keeps me going and it keeps me pushing. But there's a dark side to it too. It just happens to be who I am.
Yeah, I mean, my one question for you, and this is just totally me, my personal opinion, and we could totally cut this as well. But I love the idea that Tony Robbins wasn't the guy always. The fact that he is the guy isn't the reason he's the guy now. It's because of the way that he made people feel on an individual level over time. And then that makes you the guy at some point. So if you're striving for you're looking at the finger rather than what it's pointing to, just to use that analogy, the Bruce Lee thing, there is a sense of yes, you get to be that guy. But the thing is, the only way to be that guy is to really to start super small in what you're doing right now. So I almost think you should be extremely content in what you're doing day to day because the one thing that you say on this podcast that makes someone's day better, that's how you begin the journey to becoming, that guy with his arms spread wide, doing the whole whoa clap and stuff. It really does start small, and you should really take a lot more content and pleasure in your life because, dude, you're doing it,
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate that. And that's my biggest vice is I need to learn to be more present and be more thankful for where I'm at. But on the flip side, there is a fear there, right? Like if I don't stay in the grind and I don't stay with my nose to the grindstone and pushing forward, then the whole thing, if you reach for the stars, maybe you'll hit the moon, right? Or however it goes. You aim for the moon, you at least hit the stars. And that's the drive for me is I know that, money isn't a big motivator for me outside of the fact that you kind of need it to be successful if you want to influence business owners and influence, want to be entrepreneurs or even entrepreneurs or real estate investors, etc. you have to have that track record. But outside of the need for that, my biggest thing that I want to be at the end of my life, and I want to look back and be like, yes, the world, like there's a guy that I look up to named Ravi Zacharias. He's like a theologian kind of guy, and he recently died. And somebody said about his death that who was like not a Christian or anything like that, but he just was. Ravi Zacharias was one of those rare people where the world was better because of him. And I want to be one of those guys. I want the world to be better because I was here. And it might be a pride thing. It might be a super ego thing.
No, I think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing, man. And I was just trying to get you to focus on the fact that you're already doing that and that you should take some joy and because it's like eating a steak, right? Like, you don't eat the steak and go, oh, that bite was crap. That makes me want to eat more steak. No, you got to be like, oh, that bite was awesome. Let me enjoy how good that bite was. And then you're like, oh, I want to eat even more of this steak. Whereas,
you don't take a steak and put it in a blender and drink it in one shot. That'd be nasty.
Yeah, exactly, man. So you got to enjoy the present. And it seems like you are to some extent. So it's just awesome. It's just awesome to talk to you. And I love every time we talk to each other, like I went on your podcast, we had a similar discussion where it's like, we definitely have like a different way of looking at the same thing, and it's just interesting to talk to you. So that's been a lot of fun. Yeah, but let's talk about that 25 properties per month period of your career. That seems like a very interesting thing, and we kind of glossed over that, but that's no small achievement, man. 25 properties a month. What was that all about? What were you doing?
Yeah, so I was working for a wholesale operation. That we were different than most wholesalers in that we didn't do any assignment. So we took everything down in-house. I think we had some private money lenders and some stuff, but the way that Brett always did it was he at least put 20% into each deal. So he only loaned up to 80% using private money. And he just had been doing it by himself for 10 years. So he had built somewhat of a nest egg with working capital and what have you. And when I first started there, we were around 8 to 12 deals a month. And then I helped scale along with a couple other people on the team. We actually had a pretty lean team for how much volume we were doing. I think we had like 6 to 8 people-ish on the team. We helped brand. That's a big piece that people don't, a lot of guys that want to be big in real estate, they don't understand the power of branding because branding kind of sucks. There's not a clear ROI. You can't sit there and be like, I got a KPI of like, I'm going to, engage with this many people. It doesn't really work that way. It's just like ether, I think this is kind of working maybe. And then like 2 years later of you just like banging your head against the wall, you're like, oh, wait, people know who I am and they automatically trust me more because people have heard of my company. Oh, snap. That's awesome. So it's hard to like convince people that branding is a big deal, but it actually is a big deal. And so I helped brand the company and laid a pretty solid foundation with a podcast. And we did a lot of local stuff too for branding purposes. Like we had a meetup and we actually taught other wholesalers how to wholesale, and they would beginner wholesalers would actually start bringing their deals to us to partner on and stuff. So it turned into an acquisition strategy, and branding was a really big piece of it to just get, we got national, sometimes international buyers interested in buying property from us because when they heard of Indianapolis as a market, for residential properties, very quickly they ran into simple wholesaling as a trusted wholesale operation because a lot of wholesalers have terrible reputations and people feel like they jack up their prices and all this stuff. And we actually were legit and ran numbers as best as we could at trying to keep as much meat on the bone for the end buyers as possible. So because we had, that brand behind us, I think that really helped to get a lot of people wanting to buy from us versus other people. But yeah, we just kept growing and growing and growing. And, we grew to where we were selling 25 to 30 properties a month by the time I left. A large portion of those properties, just like the 80-20 principle is universal, like no matter what, it's in the fabric of existence. A large portion of the properties that were sold to a couple of turnkey operators. So we knew their criteria, established a relationship with them, and probably a good 12 to 15 properties a month were sold to 1 or 2 different turnkey operators that were based in Indy. So that really, really helped. But we still had another 15 or so that were just kind of people that bought 1 or 2 properties a quarter or a year or what have you.
Wow, man. Yeah, branding is really powerful. And you're so right about the invisible ROI, but it's huge. It's definitely changed my business. It just takes like 6 to 8 months for you to notice literally anything, but it's super valuable. It's super valuable. So how do you go about automating a business? Because one of my favorite things about what I've read at the beginning about your bio is that you have 100% totally automated your business. So what about how do you start automating a business, right? Everyone thinks you got to be there. I got to do all these things. How do you end up running it from the distance?
Well, yeah. So I wouldn't say it's on autopilot. I would just say that it's remote. because there's still, I probably spend on average at least 5 to 10 hours a week on my business. So maybe about an hour-ish a day, but I'm not doing crazy volume. Like I'm not doing, I mean, in the beginning of the year, it was a lot more scaled up, but I'm probably going to be sitting around 15 deals or so for the year, 15, 20 deals probably. It's cool, but I'm not like doing 15 deals a month, The biggest thing is that with the land flipping business, all of your decisions are based on data. So it has absolutely nothing to do with you being there in person. Even if like we teach people at ReTipster, we have a land masterclass and a coaching program and stuff. If people want to get interested in land is just an incredible asset class in real estate that nobody talks about because it's not sexy. Like you can't, HGTV is never going to have a show about selling dirt. Like it's just not going to happen. But all of your information, all your due diligence is all done on a computer screen through websites, counting websites. And what I do is I use land specialized real estate agents to do a lot of the heavy lifting for the disposition side, which is kind of the bottleneck in the land business. Like you constantly have to be putting stuff on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace and doing all these things. But if you use a land specialized agent, you have to get a certain type of property because there has to be enough meat on the bone to justify their commission and keep them motivated. But as long as you're getting the right kind of property and the right agent, they'll go and walk the property for you, do a bunch of due diligence for you. They'll give you the list price and you can say, hey, I want to sell this property quick. So in land, quick is 3 to 6 months. It moves slower than other places or other types of real estate rather. What do we have to list this for? And then they give me the number, then I can reverse engineer it from there and say, oh, okay, then I'm going to have this amount of profit and blah, blah, blah. And then I can take it from there. To answer your question about how do you automate things or how do you get into a situation where you can land business on just a few hours a week, it really boils down to the 80-20 principle, man. If my wife let me get any tattoos, I would have the 80-20 principle, like the whole 80-20 symbol tattooed on my body. Like that thing is the biggest core value in my life because it just teaches you a way to think. You always want to look for efficiencies. You always want to look everywhere you go. There is leverage points. And if you can recognize them and then you pull that lever, that's how you're going to get an exponential return on investment in any capacity, whether it's like money or time or what have you. So just constantly be looking for the 80-20 leverage point. That'll serve you well.
Wow. Well, let's talk about the 80-20 leverage point. What is the 80-20 rule, just simply for other people who have never heard of it before?
Yeah. So without getting into like all the history and all that, the 80-20 principle says that 80% results come from 20% of input. Only 20% of your efforts are actually giving you the bulk of return on what you're doing. And the reverse is true as well. Like majority of the time we spend 80% on our time on things that absolutely do not matter. But there's actually a book by a guy named Perry Marshall. He's a marketing guy called Sales and Marketing, or 80-20 Sales and Marketing by Perry Marshall. And that book changed my life, man, because a lot of people have heard about the 80-20 principle and they're like, oh yeah, that's nice. But he takes it to a next level because the 80-20 principle is fractal in nature, meaning that it divides within itself. So there are leverage points that aren't 80-20. Like it's like 1%, 1 to 99. Like there are things that are so powerful that you can do one thing and get an incredible return on investment if you can learn to recognize it and cultivate it. It also is really interesting because people talk about life and justice and fairness, but 80-20 is real and life's not fair. Life's always 80-20. Like the original person who discovered the 80-20 principle was an economist who recognized that 80% of the world's wealth belonged to 20% of the population. And it's not hard on necessarily 80 to 20%. It could be 90-10, it could be 70-30, but the principle is that the majority of output results from a small amount of input. And so that's at a high level, that's the 80-20 principle.
Yeah, and it's even observable in natural like law as well. Like I think one of the other examples is pea plants. Like 20% of the pea plants actually produce 80% of the crop yield. So it's everywhere. Like you said, it's just all over the place.
Yeah, I feel like the 80-20 principle should be like you learn your ABCs in kindergarten and then you learn about the 80-20 principle. Because it's like you recognize it, man. That is the difference between the ultra successful, though 1% that everybody talks about and everybody else, is that a lot of them aren't smart. A lot of them are really lazy. A lot of them, like, they're not the most incredible human beings. They just, they had a leverage point that they recognized and they used it and they got them there. So if you know that, that's super powerful.
It's a really good point. So I'm noticing the RE in a block on the front of your cap. What is ReTipster? What do you guys do, and what's your mission?
At ReTipster, we're fundamentally a realistic community. That's really what we are. Probably 75% of our audience is related to the land business, because both me and Seth happen to be in the land business. So we have a natural bias towards that in our content. We're trying to diversify from that, though, a little bit more. We're trying to, like, I'm actually pursuing apartment syndications. That's why we had Kyle on the show. I'm trying to figure out that world and do my first deal and kind of go in that direction. Just so, one, that we have more content to speak to a wider audience. And also, I also personally think that land is probably the best transactional based business model in real estate, in my opinion, but apartment syndications, I feel like, are the best passive because of the economies of scale. You can make a ridiculous amount of money for doing pretty little, actually, like, just because the numbers are so much bigger. So it's a big deal. So that's why I'm going to that. There's more sophistication and more due diligence and underwriting and a bunch of other stuff that I'm trying to wrap my head around. But that's why I'm pursuing that, is I feel like they're, again, 80-20 leverage point. I think that's a really big one. But going back to ReTipster, we're fundamentally a realistic community. We have we just launched a forum, similar to Bigger Pockets, just much more downscaled at this point. We have a really active Facebook group. We have some courses and some, like, I offer coaching services for the land business. We also have a deal finding guide course, which helps people learn the fundamentals of how to find deals and off-market deals and work direct to seller, that kind of stuff. But, we're definitely, our goal, our purpose is to empower people with real estate. And one thing that's pretty amazing, it's kind of an unspoken around ReTipster, but we try to make our content so powerful that it's like life-changing content, where it's like the last blog post you need to read on the subject. And we never, hit that, but that's what we aspire to. And we have kind of a core value of always giving at least 98% of our content away for free. So we don't hold anything back. The only thing you really pay for with our paid products are organization and overcoming the learning curve to be able to have me over your shoulder, be like, hey, do this, and this, and just so that you can get there faster. But all of the information that you need for land or any other subject that we talk about is pretty much already there for free on the blog. So we have a podcast. You have, like, just shy of 27,000 subscribers on YouTube. Like, there's some things happening there. So it's a lot of fun. That's ReTipster in a nutshell.
Wow. Yeah, you guys definitely have quite a big following, especially on the podcast, and you've interviewed some of the top people in a lot of different industries. So I guess my next question would be, as the host of an ReTipster podcast, what are some of the big takeaways that you've had? Anything that stands out from guests that you've had on the show?
You kind of hinted at it earlier about, you asked me, how do I push through? I think that the biggest takeaway for me and a lot of our guests is how much grit comes into play when it comes to success. Like, a lot of the guys that are super ultra successful, they're not geniuses. They're not like anything super, over the top. Like, it's very, when you start talking to them, they're just like everybody else. But the only difference is they kept going when most people give up. It's hard, especially when you're first starting off. A lot of guys have to work they have to work their day job, cover their bases, and then, tired at night, they have to work their real estate hustle, or they have to, fill in the blank on whatever hustle it is that they're going after. But that's the biggest key indicator, I think, is, ultimately, I think the key to success is knowing how to overcome obstacles and resistance, because it feels like almost like life is always trying to be like, you really want this? Really? Are you sure you want it? All right, go after it. Prove it.
Yeah, it's a good point. Have you ever read the book Grit by Angela Duckworth?
I have it upstairs. I haven't read it, though. But
Oh, you got to read it. She says something about how effort counts twice in the equation of success. So, like, talent and all that stuff counts, but it only counts once, whereas effort counts twice. So I'm a huge fan of, like, the whole grit model for sure. I think that's a great point. So let me ask you the question that I ask every guest that comes on the show, which is, what advice would you give to a 20-something who is just starting in business or real estate?
That is my number one. Like, if you're going to walk away with anything from this conversation, 80-20 principle, and learn how to cultivate a really strong gritty work ethic, because those are the two things to success. But if there was a third one, I would say humility is a really big deal. Being teachable. A lot of people, they get some success, they see some things happening, and all of a sudden they get a big ego and they think that they're like something special when they're not. We're like, we're all going to die. We're all going to end up in the same place. So if I could give any piece of advice outside of those two, it would be cultivate a teachable spirit, and don't ever think that of yourself more highly than you ought, because there's something really powerful in that. I don't know what it is, but it's like, I don't know, one of those weird universal principle things where it's like, if you approach a mentor, even if they don't realize that you know stuff that you do, but you take the humble route, it attracts some incredible opportunities, man. Like, it just, people give you the time of day that otherwise they wouldn't. So I feel like I'm here, which kind of sounds anti-humble, but whatever. Like, I feel like I'm here because being teachable and being anti-ego has been a pretty big deal in my life. So that's what I would say for especially young guys that are like millennials, and like, for whatever reason, young people, they feel like the world owes them something, and the world doesn't owe anybody anything. You owe yourself to go out and make it happen. Like, don't go, like, I've had people, there was one guy on Bigger Pockets that he was like really young. I think he was just graduating high school, and he was like asking for advice about how to find a real estate mentor. And so I DM'd him and we had this exchange, and I was like, hey man, I would literally do anything. Like, if you find somebody who is doing what you want to do, like, figure out a way to add value. Even if it's cleaning toilets and taking out the trash in their office. And his response to me was, well, I want to do that, but I don't want to be taken advantage of either. So how do you walk that line? I'm like, bro, be taken advantage of. Like, don't know. Like, you don't understand. They have what you want. So go after it. And like, obviously don't be abused. Like, I'm speaking in hyperbole right now, but there's a fine line between like taking abuse and being a yes man. Like, you definitely have boundaries and all that stuff, but have the err on the side of being overly generous with your time, err on that side of like, yeah, I'm running thin, because the more you give and the more you take that humble road of like, man, I'll do, I have an uncle figure right now that's helping me learn like construction stuff and renovate. I just bought a triplex that we're going to be house hacking. And one of the things that I love about his culture, he's Latino, he's like half Mexican, but he's very much like entrenched in Mexican culture and stuff. And something I really value about their culture is that they don't have ego. Like, you don't see Mexicans begging on the street looking for a handout. Like, they'll go to Home Depot, they'll say, hey, I'll do your roof, I'll do whatever it takes. They just have that hustle, that grit, that they're willing to do anything to make sure that they make ends meet. And I just love that hustle culture, man. And the lowly road of, I'm not too big for any work or any project. I just really love that. So.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different things I want to say. I guess the number one thing I'd say is like, water does pool to the lowest place. Have you ever heard that? Like, below, that's where the ocean is. That's where all the water goes.
I love that. That's so good. That's really good.
And then the other one would be like, I just read Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday, and he talks a lot about how when you think you're super good at something, you can't improve, and eventually you start sucking at it. So like, you have to say, I'm not that good at this thing so that I can keep getting better at it, because like you said, eventually, you start telling yourself all these nonsense stories, and then you're behind everybody.
Yeah, I've heard really good stories about that book. It's on my list. I actually have like a Trello board of books I need to read. So,
well, get on that. That was definitely a good one. That was definitely a good one. And then even like a biblical one at the end here was just, what do you have that has not been given to you? That's another good one. You'll find that everything's been given to you. So yeah, it's just a really humbling experience for sure. So my last little thing here would be, where can people find you if they want to reach you on the internet?
Yeah, man. So I have a couple of projects going on, actually. Obviously, ReTipster, Jaren at ReTipster.com. But I'm also, as a passion project, I've started working with a profit first company that teaches real estate investors how to implement profit first in their business. If you've never heard about Profit First by Mike Michalowicz is one of the most foundational books I've ever read in my life. And I read it like, just last year or this year, actually. So like, 28 years in. I really wish that I read that book in like when I was 12, because it would have saved me so much trouble. It's essentially a way to manage your money for like normal people and entrepreneurs that are not like, in the book he refers to like accountant types as like Spocks, love spreadsheets and all that stuff. And that was a big missing piece in my personal success and my financial success. I knew how to make money and I had kind of worked my craft in learning the land business, but managing money and managing the books and running a business is like a different skill set. And you can also find us. We have a private Facebook group that you can join, Profit First for Real Estate Investors. So you can come say hi there. Also the ReTipster forum. That's another one that's like really popping right now. It's growing like leaps and bounds and it's a lot of fun. It's really cool to see like people engage and it's a lot less noisy than Bigger Pockets right now. So there's a lot of value. Obviously I love Bigger Pockets. I'm a huge fan, but they are very noisy and there's a lot going on over there. So I like kind of the quieter, like, hey, I actually can be heard and recognized here. This is cool, So I definitely would check out retipster.com/forum.
Awesome, man. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. Thank you so much for the opportunity.